Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of YO2A Arsenal Roundup News. I am your host, Richard Espinoza. We are your primary source for Second Amendment news, whether if it's good or bad, whether if it will benefit your Second Amendment rights or cause an effect towards your Second Amendment rights. Either or, we report it. Well, today I'm going to be talking about two bills in the state of Washington. One of them is House Bill 5098, which prevents people from carrying a firearm in gun-free zones. It means not at state parks, federal buildings, away from schools. They're passing that bill to prevent people from carrying, which we know is just a recipe for disaster, because it's just sending a message to criminals that law-abiding citizens will be unarmed, so go ahead and do your dirty deeds. But unfortunately, Washington legislators just don't get it, nor do they see it the way we see it. And they just cannot accept that reality, that gun-free zones are simply a death trap, which will just encourage criminals to commit a crime. So basically what it's going to do is encourage criminals to cause further harm to your children or to your loved ones, because they know that because of this bill, law-abiding citizens won't be able to carry a gun. Criminals will, because they don't obey the law. And then here is another disturbing bill from the state of Washington, which is House Bill 1504. We're going to talk a little bit about that bill. That bill is where you are forced to buy liability insurance if you own 26 guns or more, and nobody cannot purchase a gun unless they're insured, which is a true violation of the Constitution, because you don't put an infringement on a constitutional right. You don't put no fees, no registrations, or any type of demands on a constitutional right. Because if our legislators do that, it defeats the purpose of it being a constitutional right. And Washington being an anti-gun state, it's no surprise, especially with their anti-gun governor, Governor Bozo Bob Ferguson, who is no friend to the Second Amendment. And it just seems quite obvious that the legislators in Washington simply just do not get it. And you recently saw what happened with former NFL star Richard Sherman. You had these criminal thugs who broke into his house, did a home invasion robbery. Do they buy insurance for their guns? Absolutely not, because they're criminals and they don't obey the law. You see, these restrictions are trying to make it difficult for people owning guns. That is their duty. And this is what they're trying to do. Their mission is to simply annihilate our rights any way they can. And because of the Bruin decision that happened last year, this even pisses off the anti-gunners even more. So they're finding other loopholes that they can use to further do more harm to your Second Amendment rights. And hopefully Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, as well as Kash Patel, who is our FBI Director, who was the former acting director of the ATF, hopefully they will go after Washington State for violating constitutional rights of the people of Washington. And it's just not happening in Washington. Further magazine restrictions are going on in the state of Colorado, which has been signed into law, and there will be a showdown going on in the Supreme Court with that unconstitutional law. Now, once again, these legislators in Washington, they want to sell it as a means for safety. And of course, Bob Ferguson, not being the gun-friendly person, the people of Washington are going to have a huge battle up ahead. So to the people of Washington, what you need to do is call up Bob Ferguson's office and demand to veto these bills, although we know he won't. But what matters is he needs to hear your voices, because maybe he might think twice that if he vetoes it, we will sue. That's what you got to do. You got to threaten these politicians with a lawsuit. If they pass a law that infringes our constitutional right, we will go to court. And we got to take it to court. I clearly understand that Washington's courts are not favorable when it comes to Second Amendment rights, especially in the lower circuit courts. Because in the lower circuit courts, you have these activist judges who are lawyers in black robes. And they'll do everything they can to stall your Second Amendment rights. Hopefully, this will go to the Supreme Court, because if the state of Washington has not learned its lesson from Hellard versus Washington, D.C., I don't know what they will be able to learn. But this reminds me of a debate I had with a former employee of mine, who I like to call as the old fart. And I never mean to insult him, but he thinks like a communist. He was telling me one day that he thinks that gun owners should register their guns and buy insurance. And I said, I totally disagree with you on that. He says, well, why not? You buy insurance for your car, you register your car, don't you? I says, well, that's different. Then he asked me, how is it different? Okay, I'll be very glad to explain it to you, I told him. And I told him straight up that, first of all, number one, owning a firearm is a constitutional right. It is a constitutional right written by our founding fathers. You don't register a constitutional right. And he was stone-faced when I said that. I says the difference between that is driving a car on public roads is not a constitutional right, it's a privilege. Unless you own private property and you drive your car on private property that you own, then you don't need to register your car. But if you're going to drive it on public roads, then you have to. I says the reason why they register cars because it pays to fix our roads, to pay our first responders. That's what the use of the money. Then he made the counter argument, says, well, registering guns would help people who've been injured by guns. I says, you know what? Don't give me that. It doesn't. Right? What does registering guns do? Where does the money go? And he goes, oh, I don't know. I says, it goes into the government's pocket to make the government wealthy, because the government wants to make money off your Second Amendment rights. You see, I asked him, did you ever graduate high school and study the Constitution? He said he graduated high school. And I said, well, I cannot believe you graduated high school without even knowing the Constitution. I says, you should read the Constitution. And I says, to make my point that you don't register constitutional rights, there was a time in America where the United States government put a polling tax on voting. And it was overturned by the Supreme Court because you don't put an infringement on a constitutional right. It's that simple. Constitutional rights don't get registered, because if you register a constitutional right or put a fee, then it defeats the purpose of it being a constitutional right. So if you think I should register for my guns, I asked him, would you be willing to register your mouth? And he goes, well, what do you mean by that? Well, it's very simple. Would you willing to put a chip in your mouth so each time you said something offensive, you have to pay a fine so the government can keep in track of the words you say? And he says, well, we have freedom of speech. That's my point. The First Amendment and the Second Amendment are constitutional rights. You don't put a fee on a constitutional right. And he knew I had him, but he hated the fact I was right, but he knew I was. But then he tried to make one more last argument. He says, well, what about safety? I mean, we have to find ways to be safe. And I says, you know what? You got to put the trust into the law-abiding citizen to use a gun. He has been robbed before, I will say that. He used to work at a grocery market. He got robbed at gunpoint. And I told him, I says, if California wasn't a bunch of wimps, the state of California wasn't a bunch of wimps and they weren't so spineless, if they allowed a law-abiding citizen like me to carry a firearm, I could have saved your life and I could have stopped the guy that robbed you. I told him, you go into pro-gun states where they allow people to carry a gun, criminals are not going to rob the place because chances are a law-abiding citizen will carry a gun. Then I also reminded him a quote from Benjamin Franklin when it comes to sacrificing your freedom for safety. And Benjamin Franklin said in his own words, those who would give up insatiable liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserves neither liberty or safety. That comes from one of the most wisest men of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin. And he's absolutely right about that. You don't give up your liberties for safety. But the problem with these politicians, as I said before, they want to treat the Constitution as an outdated document. It's not outdated. It's the permanent law of the land. And the problem with states like California and Washington, they think that they have a right to ignore the Constitution. Well, Bob Ferguson, the governor of Washington, will soon get a taste of reality when he gets lawsuits filed against him. So I am encouraging everybody from the state of Washington. You need to call up your representatives. Whether they're pro-gun or anti-gun, doesn't matter. They need to hear your voice. And when they hear your voice, they will think twice. They know that you are serious and you mean business. That is why you need to get involved with Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, the Firearms Policy, the National Association for Gun Rights. These are the ultimate bulldogs who are fighting the fight 24/7. These gun rights groups are fighting for us. But you got to do your part if you want your state to be free. So for those of you who are Washington gun owners, you need to get into this fight and you need to do your part. Call up Pam Bondi's office and demand that an investigation should be made against the state of Washington for infringing upon your constitutional rights. And furthermore, the people of Washington need to sign a petition and have Bob Ferguson recalled. Bob Ferguson definitely needs to be recalled because he is violating your constitutional rights. There should be a petition going on to have Bob Ferguson recalled. Now, we know that Washington is a Democrat state, so there's not very much of a chance that Bob Ferguson will be recalled. because it is a heavily Democratic state. And so it's up to you to make your voice heard and try to get petitions going to recall Bob Ferguson, because Bob Ferguson needs to be recalled. Unfortunately, in my former state of California, my former state tried to recall Gavin Newsom, but we became unsuccessful. But then again, California's corrupt. It was rigged. So there's no way we're going to get him recalled. Although at the time when I was living in California, we got Gray Davis recalled. But I don't think the Democrats in California was not going to allow that to happen again. I also want to thank the Washington Gun Rights for keeping me informed about this legislation, what is going on. I found this on social media and they brought it to my attention, and I want to thank them for that, because we're all in this together, and because we're all in this together, we have to be united we stand, or we become divided we fall. And if I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. As Benjamin Franklin said, either we hang together or hang separately. So to the people of Washington, you got to do your part. It's now up to you. I understand that it's tough for you at this point to exercise your Second Amendment rights. But if you get involved in activism and get together with groups like the Second Amendment Foundation, or get together with the Firearms Policy Coalition, or the National Association for Gun Rights. And I also encourage you to follow Jarrett from Guns and Gadgets, and Mark Smith of Four Box Diner. I encourage you to follow John Crump, because these are the people who really, really work hard and speak on our behalf for law-abiding gun owners. So it is important that you get involved into the arena and take some time of your life to protect your rights. It's important we teach our children the importance of gun safety, learn the do's and do nots of handling a firearm, and share that passion of the great tradition that many families have had, whether it be hunting, whether it be going out on a Saturday morning to do a little plinking. This is important because we're not going to live forever. And we're going to have to pass the torch to our children. And when we pass the torch to our children, it'll be up to them to secure this beautiful flag that I have behind me, and to support and to secure and protect our Second Amendment rights. Because it's bad enough that you have Gen Z that are dropping dead like flies, being brainwashed by their left-wing communist college professors. We don't want our future children to be the victims of wokeness. And unfortunately nowadays you have this Gen Z who don't even know if they're a man or a woman, but yet they want to do away with our Second Amendment rights. But also remember, ladies and gentlemen, that our Second Amendment rights do not discriminate against us, because the Second Amendment never discriminates against anybody. It's for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, whatever your political affiliation is. The Second Amendment is for everyone, and I mean everyone. I'm proud to say I also supported, back in the early 2000s, I helped support the Pink Pistols, though I am heterosexual. I'm not gay by no means, but the reason why I support the Pink Pistols is because, as I mentioned, the Second Amendment is for everyone. I may not approve of a gay person's lifestyle, but what they do behind closed doors is their business, not mine. So I care less what they do, as long as they don't bring me into it. as long as they don't indoctrinate it to me. But because they are human beings, they are Americans, gay people should have a right to carry a gun to protect themselves, because they're more than likely to be a victim or be a threat to a hate crime. And the Pink Pistol slogan is, gays with guns shall not be bashed. So I strongly do support the Pink Pistols, even though I'm not gay. But they are my brothers and sisters in defending the Second Amendment. So I will stand by them. And I proudly donated money to them when they were fighting against an injustice against then San Francisco Mayor, and now California Governor Gavin Kim Jong Newsom. So at this time, I'm encouraging all the people from the state of Washington to call up Bob Ferguson's office. Keep on calling until the phone gets off the hook. Call all your legislators, your representatives, and tell them that these bills are unfair and unconstitutional, that Bill HB 1504 should be abolished and HB 5098 should be abolished, because it is unconstitutional and it violates constitutional rights. Well, that is it for today for YO2A Arsenal Roundup News. If you have any legislation in your state that you feel that needs to be brought to attention, whether it will benefit your Second Amendment rights or will it affect your Second Amendment rights, please send me an email at Espinoza, that's ESPINOZA .roundupnews@gmail.com. Tell me what state you're from. Tell me about the legislation bill. Tell me if it will either benefit your Second Amendment rights or do harm to your Second Amendment rights. Give me your name, and I will keep your name anonymous in the next segment if you want me to. Just let me know if you want me to mention your name or not. If you don't, your secret is safe with me. I won't mention it. I just will mention that this person from this state sent me an email and brought this to my attention. That's how I will do it. I will respect your privacy. So again, you have anything that you want me to discuss that relates to your Second Amendment rights, good or bad, send me an email. I'd be very glad to help you and be your voice. Remember, we're all in this together. United we stand, or divided we fall. As Benjamin Franklin said, and I'll say it millions of times more, either we hang together or hang separately. Until then, please be safe, be armed, be vigilant, protect your home, your community, and your loved ones, because the Second Amendment is that right that allows you to do so. Have a good day, fellow Americans.